So, welcome back, everybody. The next topic we're going to discuss today is the warehouse management system modernization. And Ms. Kimberly Persall from the Defense Logistics Agency will be our presenter. When I look back on that first presentation this morning with Eric, he mentioned something that caught my ear, which was a point or shout out to DLA about some of their forward thinking. And Ms. Persall has been part of a lot of these projects we've worked with DLA on, whether it's moving some applications to the cloud, whether it's LMS, whether it's e-convergence. So, Kim, thank you for all the work over the years, and the floor is yours. And actually, one more quick intro I forgot. Patrick Weaver will help with any technical questions after the fact, but Patrick's on the ground supporting this WMS project. So, thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Yes. All right. Really thrilled to be here. I've enjoyed this project beyond belief. It is beyond fun. So I am having a fabulous time. We are taking our distribution standard system and we are modernizing it onto the SAP platform to go along with the rest of our ERP, which is also SAP for the Enterprise Business System. Clicker. Sorry. Okay. There we go. Okay, so our warehouse management system is a technical refresh or modernization of the distribution standard system, but it is part of a much larger effort for us to modernize our entire distribution process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the other projects that fall on the backbone of WMS. Then I'm going to go into an overview of the system itself, the approach that we're using, which is why it is so exciting, and then the partnership with USTRANSCOM. You heard Mr. Marsh come up earlier today, and we have been knee-deep involved in their efforts as well, so I want to talk about that a little bit, and then I'll just summarize. Okay, so our distribution modernization program is a total of 14 different projects. At a high level, these are those projects. So we're making all of our warehouses wireless, as well as our printers and our tablets. We're using voice picking technology, all to bring industry standards and speed to our warehouse distribution process. We also are working through our next generation performance management tool. That will give us the production and productivity metrics and measurements so we can see how we're doing with all of our modernization efforts and measure that going forward. Our logistics modernization and implementation support is really the big one, right? That's where we are designing and installing and integrating the industrial automation at our largest center first, at the Eastern Distribution Center to start with. That project is just getting kicked off. We're also doing some exploration into robotics and the use cases. Where does robotics make sense? Different flavors, if you will. Our real-time location system has just recently kicked off as well. Literally about a week ago, we had the kickoff. And that's where we are tracking all of our assets, our instruments, small arms, pilferable stuff, classified, making sure we know where things are on a real-time basis. And all of that is being integrated with our warehouse management system on the backbone of SAP, so everything is logically and smoothly integrated across the entire process. So in warehouse management system, we are using a sprint agile methodology. So we develop our capabilities using monthly sprints. And we are delivering processing, work scheduling, shipping and receiving, physical inventory, reporting and monitoring, as well as the transportation management leg within DLA and our disposal processes. The process that we're using to do that is we are configuring the standard first. We have excellent leadership championship for this program. They are adamant and very, very serious about keeping the SAP capability on a standard level so that we are not building a bunch of customization that will then preclude us from going to software as a service. That leadership championship is absolutely essential to making this happen. So we configure our capabilities based on the SAP standard first. Then we show that capability to our partners on the functional side of the house, and they can actually see, touch, feel, see how the process works. That puts them in a much better position to determine, what can I live with this as is? What business process re-engineering do I need to do in order to change my process to match the capability instead of customizing the capability to match the process? So once we review that standard and conduct that business process re-engineering, any remaining gaps are then absolutely scrutinized. We are required to challenge the laws, regulations, and policies. We're not just accepting the fact that, hey, there's a regulation out there that says we have to do this, so therefore we have to customize. We are going to challenge those LRPs. We also have, as I mentioned, our senior leadership heavily involved. Every customization has to be approved by our Distribution Modernization Senior Steering Committee, and they're going to approve every single customization that we put into the system. Like I said, they are dead serious about keeping standard. From there, we'll coordinate any approved customization. So there's likely going to be some gaps that we cannot get around, that the SAP solution just cannot provide, that we absolutely need in the DoD environment. So when we get down to that piece, the intention is to then coordinate those customizations with the rest of the DoD so that we can all work together and build what that standard looks like, so that then SAP can incorporate that into their standard software and we can all backport it later, so that we end up at the end point as software as a service, as a pure software as a service, everything in the cloud, we just log on and use it. That's where the real money savings comes. From a deployments perspective, it's been absolutely amazing what the team has been able to pull off. From the point that we defined our scope for what we call our minimally viable product back in January, it took us 5.5 months to get that out the door. That is just unheard of. So we got our minimally viable product out the door at our pilot site down in Corpus Christi, Texas. They're using it in production. They're identifying where the high priority capabilities are that need to be implemented next through our sprint process and Agile. We also will validate with our audit community before we declare that Corpus Christi is done. We want to make sure that this is an auditable solution when we're done. Obviously, if you reduce the customization, keep it to the bare bones minimum, your chances of auditability significantly increase because the underlying software has, of course, already been certified. So that's the idea. Then we have the IOC for Corpus Christi. We plan to have that completed by the end of FY 2019. That's our basic distribution processes across the board. From that point, we will then deploy across the distribution network. There are some site-specific capabilities at DLA associated with those additional distribution sites, so we will build that site-specific capability as we go through the deployment. Once we have all of the distribution done and we can declare our full operational capability for distribution, then we'll move into disposition and their deployment schedule. But keep in mind, we are building the software so that the disposition capabilities are being developed right along with distribution, so that we get that efficiency in software development, and the disposition community is fully involved from the beginning so they can see how this is going to work in their environment. So it's a deployment strategy that says they're after, not the capability development itself. And we plan to have our full operational capability for distribution. Our target right now is September 2020. And then with our disposition full operational capability, September 2022. So that's our targets. As I mentioned, we're using Agile development, and this is what makes this so much fun, so exciting. It's flexible. It allows us to provide capability very much quicker than we could under a waterfall or incremental methodology. Each of our sprints are time boxed, so they're 30-day increments. What we get done within that 30 days is that sprint. Any gaps from there then go on to another sprint. So we have what we call a product backlog list. So that's all the requirements that the functional community has defined. Those requirements are then ranked from a priority perspective at the capability level. We use that in conjunction with what does the capacity look like from our development team. And from there, we develop what we call a product release roadmap, which tells us what we're going to do in what sprint. At the beginning of each sprint, however, we do a refinement. So if something came up in the last sprint, brand new requirement, they didn't think about this before. Again, big advantage to Agile is you have that flexibility. You're not a year out before you can add in a requirement. So they determined something came up that they didn't think about. We can then fold those new requirements into a subsequent sprint, get it done much, much, much quicker. So we do that backlog refinement at the beginning of each sprint, make sure the content is in fact what we want to do. Then we have our Scrum team, which does the development, meets daily, making sure everything aligns. At the end of a sprint, we then have what we call a potentially releasable increment. That's very important because we do not necessarily release after every sprint. To date, we have, however. For our first sprint went live, or our minimally viable product went live June 11th of 2018. We then had a sprint in July. We released additional capability. We had another sprint in August. We released additional capability. We just completed our sprint 6 for September, and there's about 75% of what we brought to the table in sprint 6 is going to be released. So the advantage is you don't even have to determine that everything within the sprint has to be released. So in our case, 75% of it, yeah, that's good to go. We can live with that. The other 25%, we need a little more work, so we hold that back. So it gives this Agile process, really gives us a huge flexibility and ability to move incredibly rapidly to deliver increasing capability to our pilot site. The sprint reviews conducted at the end, that's where we show the functional community, hey, this is what we did. What do you think? What's your feedback? We get their feedback. We incorporate all that feedback into the next sprint. In the event that they want to move forward to production with something, then we go into the actual release cycle where we do our systems integration testing, our user acceptance testing, go, no go, traditional kinds of things to get to production. Then we also have a very important activity called a sprint retrospect. During that sprint retrospect, we document lessons learned. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? And we don't just identify what we did wrong. We come up with what is the mitigating strategy? What are we going to do to resolve those things that went wrong? Identifying lessons learned, or lesson identification doesn't do much for you. You actually have to learn the lessons by coming up with a strategy to resolve any outstanding issues. Our partnership with USTRANSCOM, our folks have been at Scott Air Force Base pretty much from the beginning through the blueprinting sessions with them. We worked together to establish a two-tiered governance structure between WMS and TMS. So it's at the GS-15 level and then the SES level. It's co-chaired by DLA J6 and TRANSCOM TCJ54. The goals of that group are to support that overall transportation supply management capability, integration, agility, and resilience, right? So we want to make sure that whatever we're doing on the DLA side is absolutely in line with TRANSCOM's path forward. We also want to promote transparency and alignment through that collaboration, and that collaboration is daily. There's the folks on the ground. We have a weekly meeting at the next level up. We have monthly governance meetings, so there is constant communication between the TRANSCOM TMS program and the DLA WMS program. We also are promoting knowledge sharing. And so what I mean by that is the TRANSCOM folks have actually participated in some of our workshops. They're looking at what we're doing. Everything that we come up with, we're sharing with them so they know exactly where we're going along the way. Anything that we can learn while we're building our solution will only help them when they're making their decisions for the larger piece for TRANSCOM. So we have that knowledge sharing going on. Across the JOIPT for TRANSCOM, of course, includes all the services, OSD, as well as that industry expertise, as Mr. Marsh mentioned. The tenets of this partnership or this governance group is to make sure we have that seamless integration between the TMS solution and WMS. They also have the exact same tenet we do to re-engineer, re-engineer, re-engineer. Do not customize. And then the last, we also want to make sure we reduce or eliminate duplication. Don't want to recreate the capability in both solutions. The last bullet there is independent but informed deployments. Obviously, we're moving out very, very quickly. From a TRANSCOM perspective, they got a much bigger audience that they need to work with, and they're in the prototype phase. So right now, the interaction between the TRANSCOM group and DLA is through our legacy system, DSS. Later down the road, when their prototype becomes successful, which I'm absolutely sure it will, we will then work to have an integrated schedule between what are we doing with WMS and what are they doing. So in summary, WMS and integration with the distribution modernization allows us to add significant business value across the entire distribution, transportation, disposition, storage, all of those processes at a significantly lower cost. Those cost reductions, of course, allow us to be more fiscally responsible. We planned that migration to the cloud as a software as a service. Right now we have infrastructure as a service. We partnered with SAP, and we didn't dictate which cloud service they use. They came to the table with Amazon Web Services. It's been great for us. So it's not our intention to dictate which cloud service they use. That's completely up to them. The Agile delivery methodology, as I mentioned, is allowing us to provide that capability much faster than we ever did before. And then I just went through the partnership with TRANSCOM to ensure we're aligned to DoD objectives. And I know I talk fast, but I'm wide open to any questions.
Rick Lima, Department of the Navy. You went over it pretty quickly, but I just want to make sure, is WMS going to replace your DSS system?
Yes, it is.
So with that, and your push to making sure that you're not customizing, you want to be standard, how are you going to accommodate your DILMS requirements and sending and receiving transactions to other services?
Really, really great question. So one of the things we're doing from a DILMS perspective is we are not just saying, hey, we have to be DILMS compliant, so therefore we have to customize. That's not the methodology. What we're doing is literally going through transaction by transaction. These are the fields that we can map. There's a standard field in SAP that DILMS requires it, no big deal. These are the fields that we absolutely need from a business impact perspective. And we're documenting that justification and again, bring it in front of our senior steering committee. In the event that gets approved, then we'll take it forward to the DoD level so that we can standardize across the board. Some of the stuff, we're literally driving PDCs. We're driving proposed DILMS changes. If they're OBE things, we don't really need it from a business perspective anymore, then why keep doing it? So we're having those conversations with our DLA actually manages the Enterprise Business Standards Office, which is the owner of DILMS, if you will. They're helping us. So where there's data fields, then the intention is to do a proposed DILMS change. You're welcome. Anybody else?
So you hit on a key concern that we have. When we have the ADCs come out, those ADCs are very important to the services. So as those data elements are identified, is that put on your priority list for part of your development at that point?
Which data elements?
Such as serial numbers, ADC 1198 and ADC 1244 as primary examples of that.
So as we build the capability, we are then analyzing the transactions and the data that we need to share with everybody else for each capability and going through the process I just mentioned. So for example, right now we're working on our warehouse tasks and the 945A. And so we're going through this analysis of every data element within that transaction so that we can determine what we need and don't need. Within DLA itself, we intend to use a core interface connection between our enterprise business system, which is also SAP, and WMS. So what we need to do to communicate with the military departments, we may not need to communicate internally within DLA. So we're documenting all that so we know, what's internal, what's external, and what the impacts are to us as opposed to what we need to share with the military departments. Anybody else? All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.